Hi, Suresh. Hey, May! Hey,
Hi.
what's up? Hello? Oh shit, your face is frozen. Ah, I can see you again. Hello, hello, hey!
Hi. What's up?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Well, as good as you can be.
Oh
Circumstances
yeah,
aren't the best.
you told
I
me
was
you
a
were
little
under the
bit
weather.
like, yeah. I just had like a really, sort of bad headache and just like, yeah. But
Oh
I'm
damn.
much better now. I mean, getting there, recovering, so
Yay!
it's a good thing. Yay.
Yo. So for those of you who are joining in from my account, that's Mae Thomas. She has this amazing show called Made in India, where she interviews indie artists and she gets them to play their songs. Did I sum that up correctly?
Pretty much, yeah. That's exactly what I do.
Yay!
I would just like,
Yes, I had.
I get musicians in the studio and be like, play me music now. Yeah.
And I had also been on her show in
Yeah.
2017, I think,
Oh my
3 years ago.
God. This feels like
Yes.
a freaking age ago, man. It's a while ago.
You've been doing this for 5 years now, right?
Yeah, I have 5 years.
5 years. Shit, that's a
It's a
long
long
time.
time to be
And
doing a
more
podcast.
than 200, 200 episodes and counting.
I know. It's so good. I mean, it was
Damn.
like my 2020 big achievement so far. So, yeah.
Nice, nice. So the thing is, before this, I don't know how many of you all know, she was also an RJ on Radio 1.
Yeah, I was. Yeah, yeah,
Is
yeah.
that right? Yeah.
Yes. I
So you were
used
there for
to
like what,
do,
2 years?
oh yeah, 2.5 years. I basically
Ah, okay.
worked, I was doing the weekend show, and then from the weekend show, I moved into doing the afternoon request show, which was super fun. It's always fun doing an afternoon
Oh,
request show. So yeah,
okay,
so I
okay.
think it was super chilled out. And it was also something where it's so nice to play people's requests. I mean, some of them are really good
Hmm.
and some of them are really bad too. So yeah.
Okay, like really bad
Sorry.
as in what? Like the typical radio hit stuff or just
Hey, radio hits are okay. I'm fine with pop. People do pop really well. But like
also you
I
would
they
have no
were they
problem.
were
So if you were doing
yeah,
that today, you would have no problem with people requesting like a shape of your Despacito. That's okay.
that's
But what did you
okay. The things that would bother me were like the typical things that so I obviously at the time that I was on One Direction was the big phenomenon, right? And I had these
huh,
girls who
right.
would just finish school, they'd listening to the show, and there was like a group of them, and I was literally playing One Direction songs like one on the hour every hour. But yeah, there were some that I just was like, another Brian Adams request, like really?
Wait, who was requesting Brian Adams in 2012? Like,
Have you never been to Toto's? Like, that's literally their entire playlist is like Brian Adams and
seriously?
GNR. Like, yeah, they're like literally half the bars in this city. I mean, you just take Hard Rock Cafe alone, and that's literally the only music they play. I mean, how many?
Brian Adams.
Yeah, you're telling me that he's still not popular? Of course he is. He's still like twiddling the
Oh.
guitar. Yeah, man. Like there are a lot of like places that still play like old school stuff. And it's a lot of the stuff that people remember. I mean, a lot of
Uh-huh.
the music that people request, if some of it is like could be the latest hits, but majority of the stuff that I was playing was all nostalgia stuff. And I get some real
Okay.
curveballs. Like I once got someone requesting Butterfly by Crazy Town. I don't know if you ever remember that.
My God.
Yeah.
Now that is someone who's clearly
It's
not
like
moved past the year
it's like
2000. Like that person
digging
still
deep,
lives in the year 2000. Like you
digging
just know
deep.
that.
Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. Like sometimes you'd get stuff and you're like, do we even have that in the catalog? Like 400 years ago. And we did. I mean, obviously because it's like on the radio they would always play songs that going all the way back to like the 60s and 70s. So like we obviously had that
Mhm.
catalog, but yeah, it just was like a real curveball request I did not expect. But yeah, it is really good. Some people are
Also, half the
remembering
people in the
Butterfly.
office would have been like, "What is Butterfly? What is Crazy Town? What is going on here?"
Yeah, but like most of the people who were working there were all like I was probably, me and maybe a couple of others were like the youngest people working there. So we're all of us were in our 30s. So
Okay, okay,
everyone
okay.
was born in the 80s or before that. So
Aha.
definitely
Okay,
like
okay, okay.
some people knew Crazy Town, some people didn't. Like our music manager was
Aha,
this
aha.
guy called Kobad. And so he's just like,
Okay.
someone requested this song. Cause like sometimes he used to suspect that I used to like slyly put like, oh,
Aha.
this is a request from Donald's in Bandra. It's another request from like, and so I'd like sometimes if like requests didn't come through or I just didn't want to play Bryan Adams again or One Direction again, I would just slip in like a song that like maybe I wanted to listen to. So
Dude, I don't know. Artists are allowed to do that. I don't know. Artists
yeah,
can just do that. Like, this has been requested by Abhishek.
yeah.
And just like play whatever you
Yeah,
want.
Abhishek is so excited that he passed his exam, so I'm playing a celebratory song for him. And then like yeah, but obviously there were some songs that like if I played them, like you had to play something that you know someone might request. Like I couldn't just play a song that like no one
Right.
knew. Like I might play like I don't know if you know this song, but it is one of my favorite like synthy songs from like I think it would have been like the 80s. But it was this band called Flock of Seagulls and a song called I Ran. And it was like it's one of
Okay.
those like the guys who had the like permed crinkly hair and stuff.
Aha.
So yeah.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
who played like really like synths like super seriously. Like and so yeah, so I would if I played that song, then Kobad would just know that it was me who put that song in there. He'd be like, why are you playing Flock of Seagulls? No one knows this song except you. And I was like, okay. Like there's certain things that you know, like maybe people might not like, and I knew there were songs that I would probably play that no one else would play. Like I'd play New Order, or I would play like, they're just like, oh my God, someone knows Flock
Yeah.
of Seagulls in the chat. That's
Well,
crazy.
we got some 80s people here.
Yeah, so impressed. Well
I
done,
have no idea
Mayank.
who Flock of Seagulls are.
Well, I'm gonna send you the song next. So
Okay.
I'm gonna send you
I'm
that
going to
song, and
get
you're
some
gonna be
good
like,
80s music
why?
education tonight.
Yeah, some synth being sent your way, pop synth. But yeah, so yeah, that was my request show days.
So I wanted to know what made you, because you were doing this RJ thing on Radio 1.
Hmm.
And what made you want to, start interviewing indie musicians and, suddenly get into this whole very underground subculture? Like it's still kind of underground.
Yeah.
Like where did that switch happen? Were you just tired of radio and you were like, okay, I find this way more fascinating? And also, how were you introduced to it? Like, how did you know, like at what age were you introduced to this whole subculture? Like, where you're like,
So
oh,
I
this
had
is
to,
happening in my city.
yeah, I have to admit, I came really late to it. That's kind
Okay.
of because like I didn't do my college in India. So a lot of like the people that
Okay,
I
okay.
knew who knew about the indie music scene or who were into like bands from here and from everywhere. Like it was in Delhi, it was in Bangalore, it was in Chennai, it was in Bombay, it was in Calcutta. Like there was like scenes everywhere. And I wasn't really privy to it because I was abroad the whole time. The only way in which I kind of like knew about it was because my cousins were in bands. So one of my
Oh, okay.
cousins, Mae Thomas, was like the lead singer of Junkyard Group, which were a pretty well-known band
Ah,
here.
okay, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And they won. So I found out about this whole independent music scene because they won like desert rock in Dubai or something like that. And because of that,
Wow,
I was like,
okay.
I found out because it just went around the in these family WhatsApp groups and all that, or whatever. WhatsApp wasn't even there then. But like it was one of those things that like my mom would call me and said, hey, Amit like got this. And I was like, oh, amazing. And then when I came back, I started working. I came back in 2010 and I was working for a radio station in Chennai. And while I was working there, I would do like an indie music show on the weekends. And then I just
Okay, okay.
heard about all these amazing, artists from Chennai and from all over. And I was like, man, this is some incredible stuff. And a lot of it I learned because I used to read now erstwhile N87.in. I used to
Oh,
type and I
yeah.
used to look it
When
up
that
and
magazine existed, yeah.
when it existed. And so that's how I used to find out about it. And then for me, I was looking through it and I found a job on N87.in as a sub editor. So I was like, I'm
Okay.
definitely applying. And I applied not thinking anything of it. Like I was living in Chennai, but I wasn't from Chennai in the sense that like I was a Bombay girl. Like even though I lived in different places throughout most of my life, I was in Bombay. Bombay was always my base. And I had family in
Right, right.
Chennai and Bangalore, like every Malayali. And yeah, so then what happened was that I got the job, and it's so funny. One of my old bosses called me today, Rajesh Ravi, who used to be the editor and the founder of Indecision, which became N87.in. And
Indecision, yeah, that's what it was called
yeah,
initially. Yeah, yeah.
and so I worked with them. I did, some level of like sort of, music journalism, and I was their sub editor. I used to assist Arjun on a lot of stuff. And it was
Okay.
amazing because I think we had the freedom to do such fun things. And then I think I worked there for, I mean, this is sad to say, but I worked there for like 9 months. And then I got this bug and this itch because I missed radio a lot. And I don't know how. It was something I was thinking about, and I maybe just like spoke to my mom about, but I didn't really talk to many people about it. But I think somehow something had happened. Like my mom's friend's friend owned a radio station, and that station turned out to be Radio One. And like my mom was talking about me wanting to
Oh,
get
okay.
back to radio. And then that conversation turned into like an interview, and then like, yeah, and then they wanted me to do the weekend show for Bombay and Delhi, and then yeah, I moved. And it
Right.
was a really tough decision because I really enjoyed being part of N87, but that was probably my first education into sort of
Oh,
the
wait. In
independent
it
music
seven,
scene.
you were working in Chennai or in Mumbai?
Bombay, they weren't based in Chennai. They
Bombay,
OML
okay.
and N87 were all based in Bombay.
Right, right. It's all based in Bombay.
No, that's what I was saying.
Okay, so that's when you.
I was always a Bombay girl, and so
Right, right.
Chennai was only like something that I did for about a year, and then when I got the job, I
Okay,
moved,
okay.
and then after that, like I was with them for about 9 months, and then from there, I was part of, and that's how my radio stint began. But your question,
Okay.
which was a double question, which was like, how did you get into the indie scene? It was pretty much
Yeah.
this. How did I end up
Okay.
doing a podcast about it? Was so while I was on the radio, they couldn't just hire me as just a weekend jock because I was only doing 2 days a week. They wanted me to do more
Right,
stuff,
right.
and because I did voiceovers and I did a whole bunch of other things, they were like, wait, you have this indie music knowledge stuff, can you also like produce the independent music show that's there on Thursday nights? And they did this thing from Monday to Friday. They would have one RJ and a show that would run across all 7 cities. So Monday nights was, I think, oh, I can't know, because they had a theme for every night. It was like love on Tuesday, rock on Wednesday, indie on Thursday, dance on Friday. So like they split up into
Okay.
themes. And so they wanted me to handle the independent music show that was there on Thursday nights. And that's what I did. And I used to contact artists. I used to ask them to be, hey, I'd love to feature your music on the radio. And most artists were like, yes, please. Because we're on any, private FM station, were you
Yeah.
playing,
Yeah.
independent music. And
Indie music.
if our
Yeah.
music manager really liked the song, then he would, throw it on in daytime or at peak hours, which was like morning or
Wow.
maybe
Okay.
evening, which was exciting. So yeah, and I think for me, I loved it because I get a chance to listen to some cool new music. So for me, it's exciting. And then I left radio because I got a little jaded. I felt like I wanted to be able to do so many things and I had all these ideas, but I felt quite stifled by this makes me sound like a bit of a hippie, but just this whole corporate structure. I
Right, right,
didn't
right.
like the fact that I wasn't able to do some really fun stuff. And even if I wanted to, and I had I could push that through. It was just so much effort, and it was just, yeah, it was tiring. And then you also feel like people aren't valuing what you're doing. And there were people that did. I was really lucky that I had incredible people from like the programming and the sales team who knew what I did was good quality stuff and wanted to continue working with me. But yeah, and then I just felt like I wasn't able to do the things I wanted to do. It was fun, like being on radio and being an RJ is a real buzz. It's so fun because it's like you push up that fader and then you're live on air. Like everyone can hear you. It's just so it's like Instagram live, right? But it's
Yeah.
see, Janesha saying hello to me. I wouldn't be able to get that on the radio. I can't really tell if people can hear me or not. My mom used to always use this analogy of like she's basically just sitting in a room talking to herself. And so yeah, that's like and it's true. I'm just sitting in a small box with a mic and talking to myself. And that I still got a buzz from it because for me it was exciting. And I sort of fell into podcasting. I got approached to make a show and they were like, if you have any ideas, we'd love to hear it.
This was IVM. Was this IVM?
Yeah. And so
so while you were working with radio, IVM approached you to do like
no, I quit radio. So I was talking
you quit and
yeah, so I was talking about why I decided to quit radio. So I was really jaded and like there were a lot of like the corporate structure didn't really suit me and that kind of thing. So because of those many reasons, I left radio. So I was kind of like explaining why I was leaving radio. And in that time when I left, about maybe a month later or something like that, I got approached to make a podcast. And like during that time, yeah, I had two ideas. I was either going to do like a film one or a music one because I'm a bit like I like film, so I was a bit of a nerd, and I used to host like a little film show for a community radio station when I was in the UK. And then so I was thinking maybe I could do something similar here, and yeah, and then but the indie music idea kind of stuck. And then that's how I decided to do like an indie music podcast. And thanks to people for all the compliments about the podcast.
And your first episode on Made in India was with Nikhil D'Souza.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. It was
so when you interviewed him,
yeah.
Did you feel like there was a difference between interviewing here for your own podcast as opposed to interviewing indie musicians on the radio? Like, did you feel like there was like a world of a difference? Or was it more or less the same? Like,
there was a difference just in I have to like admit this, and I am sorry to all the people who are working in radio right now in India, but it's really like, especially obviously AIR is completely different because they are relatively well equipped to do like big recordings, right? They've recorded orchestras, they record all kinds of stuff. Their equipment might be a little bit archaic. I don't know, because I've been there only once in like one of their studios. But private FM stations, they're not necessarily equipped. They're soundproof and like, that kind of thing, but they're not equipped to be able to do live recordings. So I can't have a guitarist plug in his electric guitar and someone plug in a bass guitar and be able to play. I had a really great guy who used to be in production, who used to help me with some of this stuff, but like these studios aren't that capable of doing that. They're just capable of broadcasting maybe a couple of voices, maybe mic up an acoustic guitar, that kind of stuff, but not be able to do it in a way that the BBC would do it or something. And so the exciting thing was that I was able to record music, right? And I realized on radio, when you're doing it, you're not recording it, you're broadcasting it. There's a difference. So when you're broadcasting it, you're checking the levels and you're hoping that it'll be okay. By the way, can you see me or hear me clearly?
It's a little hazy right now, but I'm able to hear you clearly. Like your video is hazy, but I'm able to hear you clearly.
Moving to 4G, is that better?
Like, it's not hazy, it's blurry. Oh, wait, now it's stuck.
Better?
No,
Is
Wi-Fi would be
4G
better, I
better?
guess. Oh, wait.
Okay, so
Okay, no, this is working. Whatever you're doing right
okay,
now, just
cool,
this is working.
cool. This is 4G. Okay, so yeah, so one of the things was that when you're broadcasting, you're probably just checking the levels and making sure, but you don't have complete, you're not recording the music. It's just going out live on
Right,
air.
right.
But when I was doing the podcast, it completely changed because this music is now being recorded. That means that I really rely
Right,
on the
right.
audio engineers considerably to be able to record it well.
Mm-hmm.
And then in post-production, I have to make sure that I'm mixing and mastering the music so it sounds good. So
Yeah.
all of that stuff sort of comes into play, and it's very different doing the production for a podcast and doing the sort of production for like a radio broadcast. So there was a
Right, right.
huge difference in that sense for sure.
Okay, okay. And I'm guessing someone like Nikhil D'Souza made for a really good interview subject,
Yeah.
considering he's been in the scene for long. He would have been interviewed. What I want to know is when you get an artist who's, because most indie artists are very shy people. So when you're interviewing them, how do you get them to open up? Because I'm guessing
Yeah.
they're not the most easy people to get
It
talking, right?
honestly depends. I have to admit, I agree with you with Nikhil, but because I've genuinely interviewed him many times before. So I've interviewed him like
Okay,
a
okay.
couple of times on the radio. I'd interviewed him for N87. So it's like not like I hadn't interviewed Nikhil more than once. So again, I'm interviewing
Okay.
him for the podcast. What new story is he going to tell me? But honestly, Nikhil had amazing stories to tell me. And every time I would ask him the same question and he'd always give me a different answer. So I'm like, so where did like, even if you ask that same question of like, where did your love for music or your journey with music begin? And he was like, talked about church, in his building, or he talked about singing or piano classes in school, or he'd talk about, I used to love the soundtrack of like Tom and Jerry cartoons. Like, he had a different answer for me every time. And that is just testament to like what a great interviewee Nikhil is. He's always able to change it up and give you different stories. And that is I don't think that many people, like all of us have the same stories, right? You can't change what you did in the past, but I think Nikhil
Right.
really he's so charming and he really has this ability to always keep you sort of engaged. You don't even realize it, and he's so unassuming with some of those stories. So Nikhil is genuinely a great, even if I interviewed him again now for the 100th time, I'd still get different stories. Like, I interviewed him for my 200th episode, and I found out about the fact that he nearly lost his hand in an oil rig accident because he was working on an oil rig. Yeah. So, and this story I found out really randomly. And then I was like, I got to ask him about this. And again, probably my 10th interview with him or 15th interview with him. And I still found out new stuff about him. And he was like, how'd you know about that? And yeah, it's just, and so this is the thing, a lot of the time with artists, because, being media savvy, as you put it, or as any of us would put it, is to have the ability to, be able to talk engagingly, right? And people who do it on a regular basis know the typical questions you get asked and can answer them like autopilot. But there are a lot of people who don't get interviewed that often and may not have the skills to be able to. They might just tell you the story, but to tell a compelling story and to tell it well, it differs. And I think that one of the things that I do that really holds me in good stead with getting artists to talk is I do my research. I basically stalk the living daylights out of all of their social media. So watch out, all you musicians out there, whatever you're putting up on social media, I am watching you.
Because I remember when I had come on your show, I was like, how did she even find this out? Like, you were telling me stuff and I was like, what is she? And then I was like, oh yeah, I did this thing a few years ago. Oh yeah, that, okay.
It is, and it's so, and it's exciting for me because then I get this like little nugget of trivia that I know about someone. And I think, and then, I mean, I do come from like a journalistic background. That's like, I started out as a radio journalist. So like, I'm used to that. And so a lot of people are like, how do you find this stuff out? And I was like, it's genuinely because, I found out really old interviews by some artists. Sometimes most independent artists do not have that many articles or things written about them. So I'm mainly looking up their social media. If I know them personally, then I'll talk to like their friends and get stories. I remember for Maed In India Live, I had gotten Swaratma to do a live gig for Maed In India. And I needed information that wasn't available everywhere else. So I interviewed their old manager, this guy called Deba and Deb. And I got like a ton of stories from him. He was like, give me 15 minutes, I'll give you everything. And he was amazing. And he literally gave me all these stories. So I do have the ability, like it's just calling the right people who give you, and I just vigorously took notes so that when I interviewed them on stage, I had all these stories and they were like, wow, how does she know this stuff? And that's stuff that's not in interviews. That's stuff that was, while they were on tour, while they were doing gigs and, weird things that happened to them. And so I got all that stuff because only a manager would really know that stuff. So that's how I found out all that information. So it does happen. I don't know if I saw him on the chat just now, but I think I saw Mohit Mukhi. And there's an incredible story. I just saw Mohit Mukhi. So when he came on the show twice, the second time he came as Mohit Mukhi Trio. And I remember that his keyboardist, whose name is just evading me right now, and I'm apologizing to the keys player, but he said that he did not want to talk. So, because I interview everyone, I was like, even if you're just coming in as a sessions artist or whatever, or maybe you're not a permanent part of a band or whatever, or maybe you are a permanent part of the band, but you don't want to talk. He was vehement that he didn't want to talk. He was literally like, I'm not talking. I don't want to say anything. I just want to play my piano and that's it. And I said, okay, no problem. I won't ask you too many questions. I might ask you the odd question about some songs, but I warned him in advance. And then, like, by the end of it, because I did this whole thing about, like, does any of you have any creative differences with Mohit? And then this guy was just like, you know what? He just couldn't stop talking after that. So sometimes it's like you ask the right question. I'm like, wow, you're like, and Mohit's like, wow, this guy didn't talk that much to me in jam. In jamming.
That's awesome. You actually made Mohit Mukhi learn what his bandmates think of him that's kind of embarrassing. Like,
but Mo is
you have a problem?
Sweet. Yeah, exactly.
There are conflicts? What?
Yeah, exactly. But Mo is he's such a sweet guy. And I've always and I'm such a fan of his music. And so it was fun. So these are moments in time where you get a chance to, that little thing, right? Like that's something that turns that's very quiet person into this oh my God, I can't stop talking. And and it does happen. Genuinely, I've had moments where I've had a band member who's been unwell. So they've been on tour and then, and they literally have a blinding headache, but it was this drummer of a band. And it was really tough. And he was so dazed because he took a couple of medicines, sorry.
Oh, damn.
He took a couple of medicines and because he needed to get rid of this throbbing headache, but he needed to play. And he was I think his last name was Parley. And then I asked him if he was related to Parley G because I could not help myself. So, and he's like, what? But then his band kind of helped him out and covered for him. And so bandmates, it's easier when you're with a band because if there's slightly quiet members, then the other ones will, figure out ways to balance it all out. But I think it genuinely depends on a band dynamics and some of some bands will sort of there's this banter they have between each other and they'll rag each other a little bit and that's always super fun with artists. So
and 200 episodes, that's a lot.
I know.
I can't even how many, like I'm thinking, even if you were doing one a week, how many weeks is that? Like yeah, it's seems about right, 5 years.
Yeah, exactly. And
So the thing is, like 200 episodes, like was it easy to find 200 artists, or were you like, oh God, okay, who do I call next week? Shit, I'm running out of artists. Did that ever happen? Or
never.
you feel there's an abundance of artists where you're like, okay, no,
Yeah.
there's enough number of people I can call.
I am, and this is a question I get, something that I get told a lot. A lot of people say that, like, aren't you gonna like run out of artists? And it's impossible. There's so many, and there's still so many I haven't interviewed on the show. And some of them really well known. Like I've never interviewed Parikrama. They've never been on the show.
Whoa.
So as I'm saying, like you're talking about, I've interviewed you, but I haven't interviewed Parikrama. So
Yes.
look,
You
see,
heard that?
You heard that?
You chose me over Parikrama.
No, but I wanted to have them on the show for so long. But again, because I'm also tied to Bombay, and I work with, I work with studios here that I really trust. I really hope that artists will come here. I've only ever done an interview outside of, Bombay, I think twice. One was I went to Indian Ocean Studio to do it in their studio in a place called Giturni, like a little outside Delhi. And then Apache Indian, I did in his hotel room. By the way, not that it sounds that creepy.
Okay.
His manager and my brother was producing it at the time, and there were like 4 other people in that room, so it was not like anything that exciting. But like I did it in the hotel room because hotel rooms are pretty quiet spaces. Like they're actually quite soundproofed, and the closer that you are to the airport, actually the soundproofing slightly better. So we did it in the hotel room, and and like we got the mic set up there. So those kind of things. And so I've never had a problem with like finding more and more artists. And sometimes I'll discover them super randomly. Like I have a soft spot for like, artists from the Northeast, because I think that just that entire region is so unbelievably talented. And I've been really lucky that some of those artists have come down, like, or have moved to Bombay. Like I interviewed Fame the Band. I've interviewed Dosser's Urge. I've like, it's, Taba Chaka, I've interviewed. Like, so I've been really lucky that like a lot of artists who come down to Bombay I've been able to interview. And and I don't think I'll ever run out. That's impossible. Unless like artists just stop releasing
so when
music.
you're selecting these, so the thing is, so when there are so many artists, do you have like some criteria, like, okay, like do they have to meet some sort of requirement? Or is it more like, okay, I need to be able to talk to this person for an hour? Or is it like, I really have to like the songs? Is there something like that? Or you just want to interview every indie artist you can?
No, that is, so my criteria is, definitely Made in India is about music discovery. And that's like, just like the underlined twice. Music discovery is what Made in India is about. But the show is still my show. And I'm still recommending artists, and I'm recommending music. So for me, in my mind, I got to recommend stuff that I'm really proud of. So I don't just get anyone on the show. I bring artists onto the show whose music I love, who's, like something about their music speaks to me. And it's regardless, like it doesn't matter about how old they are or where they're from or what language they're speaking in. For me, like what matters is like how the music is emotional, right? It's not just like whether I understand the lyrics or not. It's about how I feel when I listen to it. And so I might not understand all of Parvaz's like lyrics, but they're, the last album that they made is probably the best thing that they've put out so far, in my opinion. And like Kun was like this incredible, I was obsessed with that album. And so for me, it's always about the music. And and music discovery is really important for me because I grew up with that, right? Like that's, whether it was like my mom telling me about the cool songs I should listen to, or like having like that tape deck where I would record all these like songs off the radio. That was my life. I was always discovering music. And I think that's what Made in India is. but the songs that I put up or the musicians that I interview are all musicians whose music I really like. So if there's anything, and people always like, how do you pick the artist? And I'm like, oh, it's kind of like my show, my rules. So I pick the music and the artists that I genuinely like. I think like I listen to the music, I listen to all the music. And also, by the way, a lot of artists haven't also released their music. So some of them send me private links, some of them send me demos. Sometimes I used to go for, in the old days when we used to go for live gigs, I used to go watch artists like live because they might not have had like recorded music. So that's what I used to do. So for me, what I had figured out was that like based on the music that I like, I would have the artist on the show. And that's it. That's it. So if someone is like, and I've had this before, I'll give you one example. And I'm sorry I'm naming, but I'm not shaming. But music is also very, very, it can be, it's personal and it's, you know, universal. It's subjective and yet communal. Like there's something about music that, like I said, has this relationship of being something that unites us, but is also something that's super personal. And I had featured this artist, this band from Delhi, which were kind of like a comedy pop band, a little bit. Every song was like a totally different genre of music, and the band were called Kapow. And I really liked the song that they did. I cannot remember the name right now, but it was one of my favorites from an album that they put out. And it was like a funny song about this Punjabi guy in a gym, and the gym turns into a disco. And it was funny. And it was a really upbeat pop song, but it was a good pop song. And I featured it on the show. And someone had messaged me saying, I really like your playlist, but I have no idea why you featured this song. And he ripped on it. He was just like, I thought this was a really bad song. I don't know why you featured it. And I said, fair enough. But I said, the thing that I liked about the band is they didn't take themselves too seriously. They were putting out a cheesy pop song about a Punjabi guy in a gym.
Right.
It was meant to be funny. And so I said, all those things put together, I thought the song was super cheesy and it was a hilarious Punjabi-ish pop song. But they were doing it on purpose. And that's what also entertained me. And it was also a really well-made song. And so I said, those are the reasons why. And the irony is that my mom had heard the mixtape and she loved that song. She was like, this song was a great pop song. And I was like, I know. So it's very subjective. Like the songs that feature or the artists that feature and the kind of music, not everyone has to like everything. And that's okay. So even when I'm putting stuff out there, yeah, I might have an R&B song that I think is amazing, but there might be people who don't like R&B and they prefer, more rockier stuff. Like you can't cater to everyone. And so I try to I look at music as whatever speaks to me at the time,
Right. Also, I just saw an interesting question from one of the viewers.
Yeah, I did too.
Name 3 things that are plaguing the indie music scene and 3 strengths of the indie music scene.
Okay. The plaguing is so much easier.
Doesn't have to be...
Jokes.
I agree.
Okay, so
you can be brutally honest here.
Brutally honest. There are many things plaguing, which is interesting to put out there right now because of the fact that me and a couple of others, Sean, who's on the chat right now, who's given one of my 3 things that are the problem. Me, Sean Phantom, Nush Lewis, Amit Gorbaksani, Schubert Fernandez, and Vijay Basroor. The 6 of us have come together to start kind of like a union of sorts that we want to basically really help and bolster the independent music community. And it's called Indie Music Allies. And the reason why we started this, and it was pretty much started, I came in like a little later, maybe like 5 minutes after it started. But the thing was that this particular, what we wanted to do is that we wanted to be able to help the community understand what the real problems are and find ways of solving them. So we're not like, we keep saying that we're an enabler, we're not a service. So that if you want a gig, we're not going to go get you a gig. We'll put you in touch with the right people who can get you those gigs. You want PR and press, we will make sure that you get someone who can tell you how to do your PR and press really well. You want artist management, we will get you to talk to people who can help you with that. So we wanted to be able, I think it sort of happened around the lockdown. It was just like, even though we're a relatively like well-knit community, I just felt like we were all so fragmented at the same time. And it was really important to sort of pull everyone together. And I think there's like a lot of things that we're figuring out right now. Some of the things that obviously when I gave this, I did like a 4-week run of this called Copyright or Wrong, where I realized that a lot of artists don't know their rights. And the reason I know this is because my partner Sean's a lawyer. And so he realizes this. And there are other lawyers that are working in this space that also understand that. And I think that's one for sure. Sean brought up just now on the Insta Live that gigs, there are no gigs anymore. And like artists don't get paid well. Like there is, you know, one of the things that's a huge problem, we're currently living through a pandemic. How many musicians have health insurance? Right? I had this conversation with Indian Ocean, I think, where there were like, not Indian Ocean, I think it was, I can't remember which artist it was, but they were talking about how artists don't have a retirement plan. Like there's a lot of intrinsic things that are a huge problem, right? How do you save money? How do you figure out like your finances? How do you figure out your rights? How do you make sure like something as basic as like, I think I was talking about this today with Sean, was like, there's no like, I mean, it would be weird to say this, but there's no minimum wage. There's no minimum of like, I am an artist and I deserve to be paid this amount. Even if it's brackets, even if it's like, I have voiceover rates that are based on like, whether you're a rookie or whether you're a more senior voiceover artist. But you roughly know like what the industry standards are. There is no standard. There's either like free or like Arijit Singh. So it's just like, that's the... And
there's no middle ground.
There's no, and so I genuinely think that, and that's another thing, right? Like there's no communication as well for people to know that like, oh, someone like a Tejas Menon gets paid this much, or someone like a Jada Kavi gets this much as a sessions artist. You have no idea. You have no clue what people get paid. And that's another thing. No one talks about money. Why not? Like you should be able to know. I do that. I used to call up my voiceover friend saying, hey, I got this voiceover gig. How much should I charge? That doesn't happen as often. And I think like it would be great for people.
Among indie musicians, that doesn't really happen.
No. And so, I mean, I don't know how many issues with the indie scene I just raised just now. It seems like I said 20 things, but maybe I said 3 or 4. The good things and the strengths, I think, of like the independent music scene, and this may seem contrarian, I guess, but I think when we do need to bandy together, we do. I think that like there are moments where artists have complained on Facebook to say that this guy didn't pay me and don't ever go and do, you know, like I think there is the ability that we can all actually become a community when we need to, right? I think that happened with regards to, and this is a tragedy to say this, but it happened when, you know, Karan Joseph's like untimely death, for example. Like that's when the community really came together for someone they loved and they admired. And so I think there are moments in time where we can all bandy together for something that we feel is a good cause. And I think that like we're still really well knit as a community, like all of us. And I think That's what's so important, that we'll still go out and support each other at gigs. We will like we'll all make that effort because we all realize the value in that. So I think that there is like there are things that we have, and also I do think like there's genuinely great music coming out of like the independent music scene in India. And one of the things that, so my brother used to produce my show at one point, and you know that.
Joshua, yeah,
And
he played bass
Josh,
on my episode.
yeah. So I remember that like Josh used to tell me all the time, he's like, wow, the quality of like music that exists in the independent music scene. I don't think people get to see it. Like he could see it firsthand. He was like listening to this music like every time we did recordings. And I think that's what's incredible, is that people don't realize the amount of talent that's coming out of here. And some of them don't get the kind of, and I hate to use the E word because I hate it, but don't get the exposure they deserve. So yeah, because I hate the E word. If someone ever tells me, we could do this for exposure, I'd be like, expose yourself. So so yeah, that's I think that was a good question that came in from whoever wrote that question, the three
Siddhant.
strengths.
Siddhant had asked that question.
Thank you. That was a really good
Yeah,
question.
he also asked 2 follow-up questions, but I'm choosing to ignore those because that's gonna take the discussion in a very, very different direction, and I don't want to take it there.
Oh, yeah.
Let's happy, good vibes. Let's keep this happy.
Good
Let's keep this
vibes.
fun.
Yeah, for sure.
So, were there any episodes on Made in India where you felt like, okay, I don't want this to end? I just feel like I can talk and just record these people or this person limitlessly. Like,
Yeah, that's
I'll
a
just
really
go
good
on.
question.
Maybe I'll make a. Maybe I want to make a 3-part episode out of this. Was there ever any artist where you
Oof.
felt that way?
There was.
Also,
Yeah.
was there an artist where you felt like, okay, this will have to be a 15-minute episode?
Nikhil D'Souza. No, kidding. No, I'm joking. He's never a 15-minute-er. He's never. But okay, for I wish this interview would not end was definitely this artist, and I know not many people know who he is, but I'm such a fan of his music. And sometimes you get someone that you interview where the banter is like off the hook, like just the repartee is amazing. It flows and it has a rhythm, and I think interviews and conversations genuinely do. And yeah, his name is Ranjit Arapurakal, and he was definitely someone I could have talked to. I mean, the interview is probably like an hour or something, but I could have talked to him for ages because he was so easy to talk to. He was funny, he was interesting, he was entertaining. And then him and I just had like this back and forth that was breezy. Like there was no lull or awkwardness. It was like, yeah, because sometimes with some people you can have the most amazing flow with, and Ranjit was one of them. There was never any like a stop. It was just like I said, it was like a rhythm. It just kept flowing. Like whatever I said, whatever he said, it would just be this amazing back and forth. Like we were like, what's it called? I'm forgetting the term in tennis where
Rally.
it was like a great rally. Thank you. So it was like the best rally. I enjoyed it so much. And so Ranjit was definitely someone that I had great fun with, and I could have talked to him for ages. And it'd be interesting, like genuinely interesting. Thank you so much, Spinning Retina, for that one. I got that. Everyone's like, you don't know what rally is. I'm not gonna name names because like I don't like to name and shame. So that's really unfair. I'll always say positive.
But you can tell us the stories anyway.
I will tell you
can
the
tell
story.
us the stories.
The interview that and again, my problem has never been with like shy, awkward, quiet people. That's okay. I can always like make up for the quiet people because I'm a chatty person anyway. But where I feel like I don't like it when there's like aggression and discomfort, right? Like that's what I don't like. So I've had like an artist, not the whole band, but a particular artist in a band who was just really like just snippy in the sense that would just like and was very antagonizing, and I didn't it doesn't give you a nice feeling, and so it's constantly
I'm
this
not
like
able to. I'm sorry,
awkward
I'm not
journey.
able to picture this scenario. Like, what
It's there.
in an
You
interview with
will have
Mae
to
Thomas,
listen to
possibly like, why
200
would
episodes of Made in India to hear the traumatizing moments of me
you?
getting ragged, and not ragged in a nice, friendly, sweet, jabby, like, arm, fist
Like
to
this is like
shoulder kind
actually
of
mean
like
spirited,
this,
like actual mean
yes,
spirited. Oh
mean
God!
spirited, in the sense that like
And you made,
it
but
like,
do you still put the episode out where you're like,
yeah.
like, is there no way you can edit that bit out? Or you're like, okay, I'm gonna
I
cut
think I
these
edited
10
the
minutes.
really like brutal stuff, but like not brutal,
Like,
but
did you
like,
know them?
yeah, I
Did you
knew
know
them.
them
I
and
knew
they
them
just were going
personally.
out of hand?
Yeah, I knew
Do
them
you know?
personally.
Okay, and they just didn't know where to
They
draw
didn't,
the line, or
yeah. And I think it was, it's one of those things where I don't know what it was, but they just wanted to rub me the wrong way. And it wasn't like
okay,
I'm okay with being ragged because I give as much as I get. But this was like, I'm not someone
like
who
it felt
wants to
personal.
be, not, yeah, a little I mean, anything that's a little bit of ragging is a little bit personal. Like if you're bullying someone, you're
No, as in it
bullying
felt like an
someone.
attack. Like the intent was like,
Yeah.
okay, I want to
It
like,
didn't feel like you're just doing this for like a little fun. It
right,
came
right,
from
right.
a really, like you said, like the words you put together were so good, like a slightly mean-spirited kind of way. And that's why like
Okay, okay.
and it, like I said, it wasn't the entire band. It was just this one particular person in the band. And the rest of the band were amazing. It was just this
Okay.
one
Wait, you're
guy.
stuck,
And so,
and now you're back.
uh, can you hear me? I think you got stuck
You were
too.
stuck for a second, but now it's all good.
Yeah. Yeah, so it was like that one, like, and it was only a couple of moments. Some of it I edited out. Some of them I was just
Hmm.
like, it's fine. People should know when people are mean to me. So,
What about when you get like a really pretentious answer? Like you ask a question and someone just goes off on this whole philosophical, like,
oh, there's
I
so
have,
many of
like,
those.
this will.
I mean, we have one specimen right here, Karan, not Kunal, across seconds. So philosophical. They can't even, I mean, he can't even say anything.
So how do
So,
you manage that? Because you have to meet your 1 hour time limit. And what do you do when an episode is like, I'm sure there have been some episodes where you're just really bored. You're like, oh
mm.
God, why is this person talking? Do you just get them to
No,
play more songs? Or like,
um, he's laughing. No, so I don't, I mean, for me, so I'll give you an example. Corner Cafe Chronicles, love that band. And they're very, very philosophical. And a lot of the stuff that they're writing
okay,
and they're doing, has this entire backstory, uh, and yeah, it's very emo. And I was just like, wow, that's some emo stuff. And I'll tell them, one of my favorite pastimes is to read band bios, because some of them are just beautiful poetry.
most of them, most of
Most of
them,
them
most of
are
them are
just
beautiful
like,
poetry.
we are going to bring together the
I'll tell you some
souls of,
common lines.
yeah,
You remember there was this website called Reverb Nation that used to exist
yeah,
long, long back, where
yeah,
indie bands used to put up their songs. That was like the go-to place
of course,
before Indecision in its seven.
yeah,
So every band had this one where it's like, we are a creative amalgamation of some 5, 6 genres. But we come together to produce our own unique sound. Every band had this. We are a
every
creative
band has a unique
amalgamation.
sound, all of them, every
Yeah. No,
single
and
one.
creative amalgamation. Everyone is a creative amalgamation and
Or they're
of something.
genre-less. That's another one.
Genre-less.
They don't have any
Yeah.
genre. But yeah, but I don't mind the philosophizing. I think that's fine. I don't think that's a problem. And obviously, you can edit conversation in post to make it like sort of tight
Right,
and
right.
crisp, and that's not an issue.
Huh.
So if like artists are like waffling, I don't really find that a problem as long as that they're coherent. Yeah. So I've had the moment where someone's been, and pardon what I'm going to say, but they were super stoned during the interview. And
Oh
it
God.
was, and you can have like, sorry, excuse
Does
me.
that piss you off when someone comes in like stoned or like completely drunk out of their mind for it? Like, do you find that unprofessional or you're like, okay,
Well,
let's see where this goes.
some
Is it
people
like an adventure?
some people can be functional, and I think that's
Huh.
fine. I'm just like I've had the most entertaining interviews also with people who were stoned, and I knew they were stoned. But then I've also had, I think it was only one time that I had someone who was clearly was, and just talking complete nonsense, absolute nonsense. So I was,
Have you
yeah.
have you ever had an artist throw up in the studio due to excessive alcohol consumption?
No, never. I mean, that wouldn't
No.
even be
Okay.
my problem. I think that would be the studio's problem. But no, no one's ever thrown out. I know, like I said before, I've known artists who've been unwell, like someone who had been on tour and they'd just come back and they'd come back in the middle
Mhm.
of the night and they'd not slept and they had a really bad migraine. So he was very unwell, but he had to do the session. So I think I've had
Mhm.
artists who've been not well, whether they threw up in the bathroom or something, I don't know. But no one threw up no one was like so, no one's ever come in drunk. That's for sure.
Okay.
But yeah, stoned probably. I mean, there's no doubt about it. By the way, we're running out of time, just so you know.
Oh, oh yeah, okay. We have 4 minutes left. I guess I will ask you my last question. Now with this whole lockdown and this whole, yeah, lockdown,
Yeah.
quarantine, how are you going to, like, what is the future for Made in India? Like, are you still doing these interviews or?
Yeah. So I stopped recording. So I was planning to take a break in March, which is what we did for Made in India recordings,
Okay,
because
okay.
I record music and record episodes
Hmm.
months and months and months in advance. Because I also
Right, right,
run a
right.
podcasting company, so it's a lot of work for me to do the
Right,
interviews
right.
and everything, plus also run an entire company.
Hmm.
So I do them months in advance so that I'm never like working too close to the bone or anything. And
Hmm.
I had done a whole bunch of recordings till around February, which are still releasing even now. I do
Okay,
like a
okay.
mixtape every month, and
Right, right.
that's because I wasn't able to feature a lot of artists in studios. So they would send me their music and I'm like, hey, I love this. I would love to feature it on my mixtape. So I release a mixtape monthly. And yeah, so that's what
Okay,
I don't know when I'm go back into the studio, but the mixtapes are gonna still keep going. And like I said, I still
okay.
have like interviews with artists till around August. But after
Oh,
that,
wow.
it is a mystery to me as well. Can't predict the future anymore, man. So
Yeah, let's all hope for the best. Anything, cross as many limbs as you can.
yeah,
Hope for the best.
exactly.
And thank you so much. This
Hey,
was really awesome. This is my first ever time interviewing someone where my face can be seen. I have so I'm calling this series Musical Chairs. You are
oh,
technically episode one. I have done
oh,
2 episodes before this 2 years ago.
yeah.
I deleted the first one because it was terrible. The second one, I'm now calling officially episode zero because also
Yeah,
that was only audio. This is officially Musical Chairs episode one, in
I'm
which I
glad.
interviewed Mae Thomas.
I hope I
Do follow
won.
her page, Made in India. Follow May Miriam. Follow Made in India and all of the other things she mentions. Would you like mind plugging them again? One is
Yeah. So
the
Made in
Allies,
India, yeah.
Indie Music
Indie
Allies.
Music Allies. We're on Instagram and Twitter. Also follow Made in India. That's Maed in India.
In
And you
India.
can follow me. It's MaeMariam, but mainly follow Made in India. That's important.
Yes.
Masha.
And also, you are going to send me the links to those episodes. One where the banter was really good, and one where the guy
Now
was
you gotta
getting.
look up, man. Ranjit Adar Purakal, and the other one, I don't
And there's Instagram's warning. Okay, Chalo, this was really good fun. I hope all of you guys had fun. Once again, follow her, Made in India, Naed in India. And yeah, I shall see you in the next episode. Till then, bye
I
bye.
better win this
Have a
musical
good night.
chairs.
Have a good week. Bye bye.